So AI is reshaping how businesses grow, but for many leaders, uncertainty about the return on innovation stalls action. This masterclass introduces a practical framework for evaluating AI opportunities that balances traditional return on investment with broader strategic value. Learn how to move beyond analysis paralysis and gain the confidence to start where it counts. Tailored for small to mid-sized business leaders ready to explore AI in ways that make sense for their growth strategy. Just check if I've got a page 2 or not, Chris. I do not. So, without further ado, I'd like to give Chris a warm welcome to the stage to share with us his insights around AI.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thanks, Simon, for organizing this presentation and this conference. It's great to see everybody out here to learn about scaling up and to learn about AI. For today's session, my name's Chris Hogan, as you saw there. I don't know if the clicker is working. Maybe that's a user problem. It doesn't seem to have the button that's going in. Am I doing this incorrectly?
I'm going to switch slides for you.
Oh, all right. Technical glitch. Just while they're getting that sorted out, I'll start taking you through just the agenda for today's session. So I'm going to be taking you through, not teaching you how to use ChatGPT, not really specifically talking about technologies, but more about broadening perspective on as we look at these kinds of tools and technologies and we look to adopt them in our organizations, the kinds of things that help us increase the returns on our innovation. I will first start by looking at, there we go. I'll first start by looking at what's holding us back. Then we're going to spend some time just talking through how we're making decisions on these kinds of technologies today. Then we're going to spend some time unpacking what we mean by this broader lens of increasing returns on innovation. And in the latter part, we'll go through an exercise taking an opportunity scorecard, which is a tool that you can take away for yourself or your teams to help them put this tool into practice and broaden their perspectives in their day-to-day lives at work. You heard from Reframing Solutions. I'm Chris Hogan. So we are a company that primarily sells and implements ERP solutions to companies large, medium, and small, anywhere from tens to hundreds up to $1 billion. We are primarily in Canada and the US. We've got 500 customers, and we're a company of about 150 staff. Interesting, this slide still is not moving forward. Is that something that I can just advance from the computer? Maybe I need to point it at the computer. Oh, there, I'm clicking pretty happy. Maybe I need to point it at the computer. All right. My name's Chris Hogan. You heard the name. My contact info is there. You can snap a picture and follow up with me afterwards. So I've been with VistaView for about 15 years, and in that time, I've implemented a number of ERP solutions. Also, I've got a technical background, so I've done integrations, as well as leading teams that do custom solutions and custom development, and our own products that we develop and sell to customers. Over the past couple of years, my focus has shifted, as many of our focuses have shifted, to AI, and specifically AI in business. And really what my role is today is helping both VistaView and our customers understand where they're at in their AI journey, wherever that might be, from just their awareness to then gathering understanding to then trying to form an idea of where to make a move to then starting an implementation. Prior to that, my experience is in software development, working on enterprise applications. So that's kind of my background, where I come from. And I'm a university graduate from the U of C here in Calgary from computer science. Oh, this is going to be challenging. All right. So why are we here? What are the challenges that we're facing today? So we all are well aware that we face a scaling up gap. And in 2023, there's 1.1 million businesses in Canada. 98% of those are companies that are small, and those are companies that range anywhere from 100 or less employees. 1.5 of those are mid-size, which would be anywhere from 100 to about 500 employees. And collectively, those make up 99.5% of the companies in Canada. So we are a country that employs a number of individuals, and we are all small and medium-sized businesses. Now, they employ about 2/3 of individuals. They account for about half of the job creation and also about half of the GDP, and all those numbers are in the private sector. But while that's great, there's a problem, there's a challenge. And the challenge is that only 2% of those every year actually successfully scale up to become from medium-sized businesses to be large enterprises. And why that's important is that large businesses account for a disproportionate amount of the employment, of the job creation, and of economic growth. So there's a lot of untapped economic potential there that if we could, and that's really what this conference is all about, right? If we can help the medium-sized businesses scale up to become larger companies, there's a lot of potential that's behind that. I really apologize for the slides. The clicker is really not that responsive. Okay. Canada not only faces a scale-up gap, but we're also facing, you've probably heard about it, a productivity gap. There's a productivity crisis. These numbers come from the BDC, and they say, why is productivity important? Well, it drives higher sales, it drives higher profit, it drives higher earnings, and there's a number of things that all of you would add to that list. The first chart on the left is really all about the annual productivity increase. And what we see there is basically in the 10 years leading up to 2019, there was an annual productivity increase of about 1.3% in white. You don't see it on the graph, but in 2020, during the pandemic, there was a spike of about 9%. But then after that, you see that it tapered off. It tapered off so much that effectively we're back at 2019, really not being any more productive than we were, despite all of the work that we did to move into the cloud and to adopt technology and to be working in a more efficient way. In the middle graph, what we see is the productivity level compared to large enterprises. And so in the white, you see that the 63% is how the SMEs were productive relative to their large counterparts. And in 2023, that dropped down to 58%. So what that's telling us is that small and medium companies are finding it challenging to keep up with their larger peers. There's obviously some reasons behind that, but what's interesting in the data is that's not the whole story. The last graph that you see there on the right, it really compares productivity versus other countries. And what we see there is in the US, we're about 28% less productive than companies in the US. And when you compare it to the G7, we're about 18% less than the G7 average. What's really concerning, though, is that these numbers are not just from recent years. It's actually been on the decline for about 20 years. Now, Canada not only is facing a productivity crisis, but there's also a digital maturity crisis that's happening. These numbers come from the BDC, and it's a study that they were updating. And when we talk about digital maturity here, really what we're talking about is both the tools and the technology that they're using in their business to run their operations, but they're equally talking about the leadership and the people, the ability for them to take these tools and deploy them and manage the digital transformation within their organizations. What they found in this study is that SMBs are investing in digital maturity, in these tools, but they're really not transforming their businesses. They're not finding their way to make those significant transformations in their business. In 2021, just to give an understanding of how much is being invested, 91% of SMBs were investing to the tune of about $120,000 each on average. But of that, the BDC, canvassing and doing this study found that only really 5% of all of those companies were really using those technologies effectively and transforming their businesses. They also found that those companies are the ones that are growing faster, are more productive, are more competitive, the ones that are a lot more resilient, more likely to increase their sales, and you can imagine what the flip side is for the ones who are the laggards. Some other interesting findings, only about 60% of companies have a website, which is shocking these days. You'd almost think that that's a given. Only about 40% have like a core set of applications that they rely on to run their business and not integrated at that. Also, only about a third of them are really analyzing any of the data that they're collecting, for example, customer data. But what's really telling is that of all of the companies, very, very, very few have any kind of digital strategy or digital plan, like a multi-year plan in terms of their digital platform, where they are now and where they're headed. So how this all shakes out is, on average, SMBs scored an average of 51 out of 120 on across basically all these different axes of the digital maturity, but really lagging in almost all of the axes. In contrast, the digital advanced companies scored a 98. And really what made them different is that they treat technology, they treat innovation as a strategic differentiator. They're investing more in digital technologies and they're investing more in growth. They also found that there's a digital divide that is emerging between the laggards and these advanced companies. What sits behind the 5% is about a 20-25% swath of companies, which is many of the companies, medium-sized companies that are already doing the kind of work that's necessary to start emerging closer to these digital advanced type of companies. But there's a large number of companies that are really struggling to keep up. And if they don't start making strides, they're going to find it extremely hard to actually catch up. We're almost done with the bad news, and then I'll get to the good news. I might just have to point at you, and you can flip the slides. I think that's what we'll do. Okay, then there's innovation, right? We've been hearing the word innovation. Well, Canada's also facing an innovation crisis. And this is something that SMBs are facing and walking into. This comes from the Conference Board of Canada in 2024 is when they were running this study. And why they tell us innovation is important is that innovation is a leading indicator basically for any economy that's going to be remaining as a strong economy and having a high standard of living. So you just can't have that in a sustainable way with low innovation. And that's important for us, right, personally, for our lives. So when they looked at innovation, they basically scored Canada a grade C on their report card. We scored 14 out of 21 of the indicators. We were below average, and basically ranking 15th among our peers, our 20 peer countries. It's so bad that the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, forecasts that Canada is going to be the worst performing advanced country probably for the next 4 decades in terms of innovation. Now, some reasons they found for this, are actually back on the last slide, but it's fine. The reason they found for this is, when it comes to innovation, we're naturally a country that is very risk averse when it comes to innovation. We have a lot of fear for taking those steps. We have a lot of angst for failing. We just don't take the big, bold moves as much as our counterparts do in the South. There's also a decline in research, and that's both in government, but within our businesses as well. And when it comes to technology adoption, they're echoing what they're finding in terms of the digital maturity. There's just a huge underperformance in terms of really adopting technologies to transform our businesses. So the call to action here from the conference board is that business leaders, we need to train our organizations to be more adaptable and more welcoming of change, more innovative within our businesses, and adopting technology in a faster and more effective way. All right, this is the last one on the bad news, and then we'll get to the good news. When it comes to AI adoption, we're also facing an adoption crisis here. This comes from Scale AI. They're an institute that is working in partnership with the federal government as well as other institutes really to take research, AI leading research, and translate that into solutions in industry. And the backstory here actually is great, and it's a really good story to be proud of as a Canadian. Back in 2017, Canada was one of the first countries to stand up a national AI strategy. It's the Pan-Canadian AI strategy. And there's now about $550 million that's being invested in the Canadian economy and in society through to about the 2030s. And it really is about all advancing the adoption of AI. And it's through companies and partners like Scale AI, as well as other institutes, AI institutes, like we have Amy in our back door in Edmonton, you've got Mila in Montreal, and you've got the Vector Institute in Toronto. These are all organizations that are working with businesses to deploy and help commercialize AI. So the findings that they have here is that Canada is really strong on the research side, really on the supply side of AI, specifically in research. We've got top-ranked research around the world. We're recognized around the world for basically world-class research. And you may not know it or appreciate it, but some of the foundational developments for the technology that you're using today, like the ChatGPTs and things like that, actually were born out of research for some leading figures in AI. And some examples are Jeffrey Hinton in deep learning out of Toronto, Joshua Bengio, deep learning out of Montreal, and most recently Richard Sutton, who's a pioneer in reinforcement learning up in Edmonton. So we've got a lot of knowledge, a lot of talent. What we're lacking, though, is on the demand side. What we're lacking is we don't have enough demand for what they're generating in terms of these innovations. We're also lacking in terms of the AI talent just within industry. And what's problematic with that is that the research alone is not going to maintain Canada as a global leader that it is right now in AI. What's really needed is a large-scale adoption by industry, by businesses, of AI in their companies. So that really is the missing link. And the challenge that we all face as SMBs, and it's something that Scale AI echoes, is we have a pattern, because we've got so many competing priorities, we've got a pattern of low investment in digital infrastructure. We have a pattern of where we're slow to change our organizational culture to really adopt the technologies in a quick way. And we have a tendency to underplay or underinvest to the necessary amount the training and upskilling and reskilling of our talent. So the call to action here is from Scale AI and other AI institutes really is around business leaders stepping up to make, and not that they're not, right? Everybody now is well more aware of AI and what's at the table, but it's even to double down even more in terms of ramping up their demand and their adoption of technology, and also in the upskilling of their employees. So here's the good news. The things that you need for a lot of this, while there is a lot of technology skills and knowledge that we need to acquire, really what you need is the growth mindset. The same mindset that you're using to grow and scale your businesses, we need to take that, and that's mostly what we need to take, and apply it to how we're adopting technology. It's in that way that we're going to drive a better adoption and lasting change around these technologies, and that's what's going to make a real strategic difference in our businesses and how these technologies are being used. And so really what we mean by that is, right, being more curious, being open, creating a culture of change and learning and adapting, taking action despite uncertainty, which there's a lot of these days, and in particular in AI. And we mean thinking in systems and data. But it really is, as Dr. Simon notes in his research, using technology as a strategic lever, and that's echoed, right, by Scale AI and the BDCs and other organizations out there. So for the rest of this session, I'm going to invite you just to keep that growth mindset in mind as we explore return on innovation, and as we explore broadening our perspective on looking at these different technology projects and how we can increase innovation, because it really comes from that growth mindset. Okay, so enough of me talking. I'm going to flip it over to you, And we're going to do this a little bit differently than what's on the slide. We're just going to do this just based on the room, just by a show of hands. Just by a show of hands, who would agree that ROI is the most important criteria when evaluating whether or not you should proceed with a technology project or AI? Just raise of hands. Okay. If it wasn't ROI, maybe it's another financial metric. Maybe it's an NPV. Maybe it's IRR. Okay. So if it wasn't ROI or it wasn't a financial metric, maybe it's something else. Who in the room would agree that maybe it's data? I see some head nods. What if it wasn't either of those and it was maybe people? I see a few of those. So it's interesting, and you can advance the slides. So what's interesting is our natural tendencies actually, and although there's a smaller audience in the room, more online, our natural tendencies when we're looking at these kinds of projects, these kinds of technological advancements, is we're looking at ROI. We're looking, does it meet the ROI hurdle? How many conversations have you been in where you're trying to advance ideas and it really is all about the ROI? And it's not that that's not important, right? That's absolutely a starting point. It's a non-starter if we can't meet that. But there's so many other things beyond the ROI that also come and deliver returns. You can advance the slide. Oh, sorry, there was a couple. Advance again. All right, here we are. So this is what we're talking about when we are saying we want to broaden our perspective on return on innovation. Because if we want to increase our returns and we want these innovations to be adopted and we want that adoption to be a lasting change, we also want our organizations to become more digitally mature, we have to broaden our perspective. It has to be broader than just the ROI because we have to be pulling on multiple levers, right? We need to be pulling on strategy. We need to pulling on value and people and systems, and another one around the learning and velocity and continuous innovation. It's really together that pulling on these levers is what's going to create stacking effects or compounding returns over the long term. And this really isn't that much different if we think about it in terms of the way that every day you're looking to grow your business, right? It's a long-term game. It's not a one and done. Everything is going to build and stack on each other. And so if we use that same growth mindset, and as we look at each individual opportunity, and we challenge ourselves to pull on additional levers with each opportunity, that's how we can create these compounding stacking effects. But that challenge is really our natural tendency, right? Our natural tendency to look at ROI. So what's coming next is we're going to take you through and just unpack a little bit about what we mean around each of these levers. I won't go into a ton of detail because I'm frankly not going to be telling you anything new. You know a lot of these things. You're applying them in your business day to day. And the goal is not to teach you those. The goal really is to create some insight, and hopefully you walk away just with some ideas about how you, or if not you, your teams, can broaden their perspective the next time they're looking at an opportunity like this, either to proceed with it or to cancel it. All right, so we start with strategic fit. This one here is, pretty straightforward in terms of, does it align with our core business strategy? Is it advancing any of the strategic priorities that we have either this quarter or this year? Then you've got competitive advantage, right? Is it helping us strengthen our competitive advantage, or maybe it's helping us create something entirely new in terms of competitive advantage? But what about future optionality, right? Is it helping lay groundwork for something that's coming right after this or soon after this? Maybe it's a new offering, maybe it's a new business model, maybe it's building capabilities. So those first three, those are actually pretty instinctive, right, for everybody in this room. They're also probably quite instinctive for the teams that report directly to you. But as you move further away from that, they become less instinctive. That last one, though, around future optionality, it's not always that instinctive. Sometimes for us, most times for middle management. But actually, that's one that can create really long-term stacking effects where small wins can accumulate into large returns. And so here's just an example of, an opportunity when you're looking at it to kind of highlight the point. And it's a very popular use case, right? AI chatbots to help with support. So when you look at that kind of opportunity, for sure, it's something that's going to align probably to a strategic priority of improving your efficiency in customer service. It's probably going to help, right, you be more competitive by allowing these support tickets to be handled a lot more efficiently and reducing support costs. But if we challenged ourselves to think about a future move that may exist here in terms of the data that would be gathered through the interactions of this chatbot, example, the pain points that the customers are experiencing, there might be a future move there to consider in terms of how that could be used to help you generate product improvements or even come up with new service offerings. And so if that was important to you, that would influence, a decision when you're looking at this to either proceed with it or cancel it, depending on what the state of the project was, whether or not you would continue with it or not. So it's a future move example where, right, it can set up a stepping stone for the next move. Next slide. Next, we look at scalable value, and this is really the traditional kind of financial pieces that we're all quite familiar with. Right, so first and foremost, is it solving a business problem that a stakeholder is willing to pay for? We always start there. Then it's, is it delivering the near-term return on investment? That's a hurdle that has to be met, or it's a non-starter. Then there's also future value, right? Like, what if the ROI is modest, but if we look further out, the year or years following that, there's other returns that come, much bigger. But it's not what we would have expected, just on the short-term initial ROI. Then there's the last one around kind of sustaining value, which is really all about, as this thing, the volume on this solution increases, is it something that is going to require an equal number of resources or people to work on it? Or are we going to get, decreasing economics as this thing scales? Also, is it going to help you basically establish a path of delivery, a go-to-market around this? So here too, the first two are quite intuitive for everyone and middle management, but the last two, as we look to middle management or teams below that, are actually really close to the technology and the solutions. They don't necessarily think this way. So here's an example that, by pulling on multiple threads, and the ones that aren't necessarily apparent, if we were looking at an example, for example, like AI invoice processing, we've got invoices that we want to essentially scan from PDF and have them entered into the accounting system. That's something that everybody either already has or is looking to do. We all get volumes of these PDF invoices. But what if, as we look to, future value, this solution, if it was something that once it was actually in place, creating these invoices, could also easily be adapted to scan in purchase orders or scan in contracts or scan in expense claims. If that was a possibility with that particular solution, or it was even remotely possible, that might be really interesting and might be worth exploring before you put much investment into that project to actually validate that capability. Because if there is a capability that's there, there's a bunch of future value that you could unlock with that particular opportunity. The next one we look at is people capability. And this is all about the human element of change. And that's always been a huge challenge for any kind of change. This was true before AI, but it's even more so true now with AI. And the reason for that is AI is not just a tool. It really requires behavioral change. It's also changing a lot faster than any of us can adapt as humans. If we think about the eras that we grew up in through, say, personal computers, that actually took, 1 or 2 decades to unravel. If we think about the internet, that kind of took a decade or a few years to unravel, right? Before everything was really moving on the internet. But that's not true with AI. AI is unfolding literally in, months, if not weeks sometime, in terms of the amount of technological advancement. And that's just not a pace that humans are able to keep up with. And so all of that also, as the technology is changing the ways of working. And what that brings as well is fear and angst and anxiety for workers in terms of what that means to their roles and their jobs. I was up at the AMI conference, the AI conference last week in Edmonton, and it was really interesting to hear. Last year, the dialogue was all about data and security and responsible AI, because there was a lot of fear and anxiety in starting on any kind of solution. This year, there's still discussion about that. But what overshadows all of the conversations is all about upskilling, AI literacy. The work is changing. Also, nobody has these resources in-house, and you're not going to find them out there. The talent just doesn't exist. You're going to have to look internally and find ways to upskill and retrain your employees and get them ready for the changes that are coming. That conversation is overshadowing everything. It's happening at the policy level in government. It's happening in education, in post-secondary, and even in grade school. And business leaders are also talking about this. It's also reflected in the Big Five's reports and research that they're doing. So we need to focus on developing our people's capability. And what we mean there is, and we've talked about it already, right? Establishing a culture of change, promoting continuous learning, lifelong learning, because that's just the reality that we're all moving into. And growing up digital literacy skills, and what we mean by literacy is having an awareness and understanding, and then becoming skilled and proficient in them, whether that's systems thinking or data or AI. And then creating an environment where teams that have these skills are really engaged and thriving to work because they're high-performing teams. So here's an example of this particular, when we look at people capability, you may have already implemented ChatGPT, or maybe it's Microsoft Copilot, and maybe how that went was it got deployed, and there was some training, and now here we are, you've got skills, but you're kind of still unsure, you don't quite get it, you're not getting the same value as your peer next to you, you just aren't seeing the value. And so if you compare that instead to an organization that's getting a lot of value out of it, I'll speak from VistaView's experience. When we rolled out Microsoft 365 Copilot, it was less about the technology, it was all about the people. And it actually started right from the top. It starts from the executives and the senior leadership setting an example, speaking about it, making it known that this is a priority in the company and aligned to where we're going. And then we framed it around the employees. This is all about building in them, investing in them, and building skills for the future, because they're going to need that to be successful, and we need them to be successful. And by creating expectations, you then have people that start trying it, start applying it, and start using it. But you don't just provide them training, you provide them in-context training. You teach them how to do the prompting, but you teach them in ways that's really relevant to their job, use cases that they're going to be facing day to day. And the more that you do that, the more that people see it everywhere being used, they start to naturally experiment, they start to naturally use it, gain confidence over time, and it becomes part of the way that they do their work. And that's really what creates lasting change, because we made it all about the people. Next, we move to systems and data. And this one here, you've probably heard that AI is all about the data. You need to have a lot of data, and it has to be high-quality data. That's true, but it's an oversimplification that doesn't serve any of us well. It's an oversimplification because software has always needed really good inputs to have good outputs. Business has always needed good inputs to have good outputs. So when we talk about data, what they're really talking about is data's messy. The quality is messy, the formats are different, and data's abundant, right? It's just, there's so much of it. And it's everywhere. It's in every system, it's in siloed systems. That's what we're talking about with data. And so really, when we say that AI needs good data, it's actually more about AI needs usable data that you can easily access in your companies. And so what that really calls into question is our digital maturity. How are we making that data available in an integrated way across our systems, getting it to where it needs to go? And you heard that echoed by a number of organizations at the beginning of the presentation. And so to close this gap, we really do need to focus on integrating our systems. So when you're evaluating opportunities, there's threads here that you can pull on too, right? Because it's not just about the software, it's not just about the technology. We can pull on threads to help move these things, our systems, our integrations, our data, better towards what a digitally advanced company would look like. So an example here would be, I'm just going to use an example of, you might be looking to do an AI analytics solution. Say you want to predict customer churn, or whatever kind of AI analytics solution it might be. It's a very common use case. And the way this goes is you've got data scattered in multiple systems, right? It's in your CRM, maybe it's in your support system, it's in your billing system, and you need to tie that all together so that you can do AI on it. And so the natural inclination might be we need to gather all that data and we need to move it over here and then we need to clean it up and then we can do AI. That's actually the worst thing that you could do. The best thing that you could do is identify just the key elements of that data in the systems that it has, the data that's going to solve that specific use case, and you take just those elements and you get them flowing in an integrated way into a unified platform. And what that does is it avoids wasting time and money on all the other data that you're not going to use but you thought you might need later. And it moves you towards that unified data platform that everybody's talking about. And there's a number of vendor solutions out there like Databricks and Snowflakes, a number of them that provide the technology for that. But what this really does is it makes you take that step and step that foundation, moving you towards the next time you want to do something, maybe it's even more of that same use case. It makes it a heck of a lot easier to keep building onto that platform. And in doing so, time over time, with these opportunities that come across your desk, that's how you move towards building a data platform, a digital platform, that's what your business needs, without having to do it in a massive scaled way and spending a lot of unnecessary money. The last one we look at here is around learning and velocity. And it's really about continuous improvement. Our businesses, we think in terms of people and systems and processes, naturally, because that's what gets the work done. But continuous innovation and improvement oftentimes gets undervalued or overlooked. But it's really unfortunate because it's really something that drives how quickly we can adapt and how well we can execute and how fast we can turn ideas into outcomes. So it's that learning and that velocity. And there's all kinds of authors that write about this, and it's all about developing muscle in the flywheel, right? The faster that we can learn, the faster we can apply those learnings and turn that flywheel, the more nimble and faster we can execute on these things. And so here's an AI example of a use case that's quite hot and popular these days, agentic AI. If you haven't heard that, you just need to get anywhere on the internet and you hear all kinds of stuff about agentic AI. Everyone's really excited about agentic AI, and rightfully so. They should be. It's got the ability to tap into systems, manipulate data, and move it over, and basically replicate work, mundane work, that employees are having to do today. But it naturally goes this way. When we see that kind of technology, we get really excited, and we want to automate everything. We want to automate like a full end-to-end process. And so if we take that example of automating, say, vendor invoices, it goes something like this. Well, I really want to take, the PDF vendor invoices from my document management system, and I want to bring them over here, and then I want to reach into my accounting system, find the purchase orders, and I want to match that up. Then I want to find the receipts, match that up. Oh, and I want to post the invoice, and I want to do it all automatically. Just notify me when there's a problem. A lot of teams tackle it that way, and it sets them up for failure. And the reason is that they took on too much, too fast, and it was based on a lot of assumptions that they hadn't validated yet. And so the smarter move there in these kinds of solutions, while the technology is still evolving, is to take one piece of that and automate it, a piece that's being done today, works well and works consistently, and automate just that, and see that you can get that done. It allows you to get that out to the user, something they can actually use and that you can get feedback on, and it allows you to test and validate a ton of your assumptions, setting you up for a lot smarter next move on whatever the next piece that you plan to tackle in that use case. So, bringing that back full circle is, again, right, as we look at how these levers work together, opportunities come across our desk nonstop in terms of technology, innovation, AI use cases. And we always kind of naturally get inclined to ROI, and whether it meets or doesn't meet is kind of where we stop. But there's a ton of returns or potential returns if we think beyond that. We just have to challenge ourselves. And that's something that's been evolving even within VistaView, and that we're sharing that dialogue with our customers. The way to put this into practice is, this is just a one-pager kind of cheat sheet, which I think just in terms of time here and the audience and the room, I mean, just the size, I'm gonna probably just walk us through this, and then you'll understand how it works, and you can take it away. I do have copies here that we can pass out at the end, and you can take that away so that you've got it. So I saw some snapping pictures, feel free to do that, but it's also something you can take away. So basically along the left-hand side, you can see there's the 5 different levers. In the middle column, I won't take you through because we've kind of unpacked all of that. It's all on there, it's quite a bit of writing, but it's really meant to be instructional. On the right-hand side, what you see there is basically a scoring system. And one thing that might jump out is the numbers kind of don't make sense. Like it's not 1, 2, 3, it's not, but it's intentionally nonlinear. And you can see it's probably, there's about a doubling effect, basically. On the backside of the score sheet, actually, maybe if we could, yeah, you're gonna handle, that'll be great. On the backside of the score sheet, there's basically a description that sits behind each of those scores. And what the description basically reflects is as you move from left to right, it's really talking about these characteristics of what a more digital advanced company would look like. And so the whole idea is, as you're evaluating this opportunity, you're looking at this opportunity, you're first looking at, okay, well, what does my organization look like right now in terms of, say, strategic fit and leverage or scalable value? And just to get a concrete example here, what I'll use is, again, I'll use the example that VistaView had in terms of rolling out its Microsoft Copilot 365. So you're starting to get the handouts right now, but I'll just kind of walk you through. So basically in the first dimension, on the back side of the scoring kind of rubric, when we think about VistaView, when I think about VistaView, I think we're a great company. I think we're like a lot of companies, right? We've got a number of solutions, we've got stuff integrated, but there's some stuff we'd love to have integrated. So when I look at through all of this, the numbers that I'm giving you is really from my perspective, my experience, which I think is reflective, again, of a lot of our companies and what you're hearing from the digital maturity from the BDCs and others. And so when we were looking to basically, roll out Copilot, looking at, strategic fit and leverage, we saw VistaView as basically a company, right, where we've got a number of strategic priorities, and the first thing we want to do is make sure that we're driving this particular implementation to one of those priorities. Otherwise, it doesn't really make sense. We're diverting resources and we're putting people on just things that don't make sense. So one of our core strategic pillars is operating at scale, is using processes and tools and technology to make things more efficient and lift people out of the mundane and get them working on higher value work. So this was something that clearly aligned for us to a strategic priority. For sure, there was one. Did it meet multiple? Maybe. Did it meet, a ton? And just those are the kinds of questions that you would ask yourself as you move from, 3 to 5 to 10. As I look at scalable value, we ran the math, like what does it cost for a Copilot license per user per month? How many people are we looking to roll out? And the math there starts to make a ton of sense. You don't really have to use that kind of solution very long for it to save you a lot of time. But here's where it gets interesting. When we look at people capability, we're an organization, right, where we're open to change. We adopt change. But like many organizations, it takes a champion, right, to move that forward. We're not quite there yet, that teams are just running with that kind of stuff themselves, like a 5, but that's where we'd love to be. And that's the kind of capability we want to develop. We want to develop capability in building up their digital skills and their digital literacy. This kind of tool was fantastic for giving them something that was safe, that they're hearing about out there, that they can start exploring and using within their work, and that we can provide them support on. So really this was something that, although we might be a 3 or between a 3 and a 5, it's gonna help us move towards a 5. We absolutely want to be looking at something like this. I'm gonna skip over the systems and data and backbone. And just talk about learning velocity, that's another one where, when we look at learning and improvement, we're like every company. There's a lot of things on the go. Do we do it all perfect all the time in terms of taking a moment, reflecting on how that went? Yeah, we do, but it's kind of in pockets depending on the team, right, in the department, the level of maturity, all that kind of stuff. It's just normal business. But is there a way that we could build curiosity in these people and in these teams and getting them thinking about different ways of working and better ways of working? Yeah, for sure. So that's the kind of thing here too, right? Where you could consider yourself to be a 3, but there's opportunity to move up towards a 5. And that's the whole point of this scoring rubric, is as you get an opportunity, it's meant to be quick. You should be able to do this basically within 5-10 minutes. As you kind of go through these levers top to bottom, and you then look at kind of where you think your organization fits, and now you've got this opportunity. Is this opportunity going to help me kind of do more of the same in a 3 or a 5, wherever you happen to be? Or is it something that's actually going to allow me to pull one of those threads, multiple levers, that's going to help me move towards becoming more technologically advanced? Once you've gone through that scoring, really the last part, the acid test, is on the right-hand side, the next step signals. And it's just a quick kind of, what's this thing telling me? And it's pretty intuitive. But again, it's intuitive for you because you guys think that way. It's not necessarily intuitive for your teams that report to you, and as you move away from those teams to the people who are actually working on the technology. But if we can help them all think broader and think about returns that are beyond just that ROI that we're asking of them, they're going to be bringing us all kinds of great ideas to help lever up this kind of stuff. So that really is the tool that helps you just kind of put these ideas in perspective. And again, it's not teaching you anything new. You guys know these principles. It's more that we always kind of get gravitated to our natural tendencies and look at things like ROI. And we miss the opportunity to pull on these kinds of levers, that if we pull on those levers over and over and over again with every opportunity that gives us the chance to just pull on them, that's how we can create these stacking and compounding effects. And that's what's going to really increase your return on innovation. So just to wrap it up, the last slide, you can probably just advance. And I've got them here. It really just, again, it's the growth mindset that you guys already have, but it's applying it to technology. It really does start with the people. They're the ones that are using the tools. They're the ones running the processes. They're the ones that we rely on to drive this growth and innovation. Then it's about systems and data, and it really is about ensuring that you've got things integrated and flowing. And I've already talked about the multiple levers, so we won't really pull on that anymore. But the last one in confidence is to kind of just conclude on this is, if we anchor too much on ROI, a lot of things that have potential for these great opportunities to deliver more value, more returns in these other dimensions is really a lost opportunity. So looking at things through this broader lens can help you create confidence that if the ROI is, it's good, but it's not as good as we might want, it still might be a really good idea to pursue because there's other things there that can help your business grow. That's it from me. I think we've probably got a couple moments for questions.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Jennifer Masick. I'm the CEO of Magna Engineering Services. So we do nature-based solutions in the civil engineering space. And my line, which is relevant to the question I'm going to ask you, is that I'm doing innovation in one of the most archaic engineering industries in the world. We do the same thing that we've done 100 years ago. And so it's really difficult to make decisions in general about change. Excel is the backbone of every engineering company that I work with, including our own. We have been, I would say, the decision paralysis is insane. Really appreciated your presentation today. Something that we've accessed a lot is grant funding, hand-holding, things like that. So I look like a process like this, and I feel like I learned so much in the short time that you're chatting about it. Any recommendations for some of those first steps? And the reason I say that is if I go back and I do this, I'm still bringing it into a fairly archaic model.
Yeah.
So sometimes the support from an organization or grant funding support can be the catalyst to kind of get over the hard part and jump into something like this. Allows us to take a little bit of risk. at the beginning. Any advice on that or anything that you know about?
Well, there's a lot of first starts depending on kind of what the dimension is that you're trying to move forward. I think one of the best first starts for any organization is actually starting with the leadership and starting with the management team who actually has those same challenges. They're busy working their day-to-day. They're not necessarily thinking about the way that the world's changing and the way it's changing work. So they need first a session to understand, if not already, and even if they do, just to get everybody level set on the same page of the realities of what's transpiring in the world. And part of that is just education, right? Sessions like this. But the other part, my mind has shifted on this, but I was really fascinated by seeing the dialogue also switch in the conference at Amy, and this comes from a report, I think, in Accenture, is shifting from, I think they called it, like, we're not going to be pulling you anymore and trying to convince you that this stuff is changing and it's happening. It is happening. We're going to be setting expectations, right? So we're going to educate you and make you aware, and then we're going to communicate it out across the organization that this stuff is important. This stuff is going to help run our business. This stuff is going to help you become more successful. This is important. And by communicating that and then working it into their roles and their performance and measuring it on it is really how they're starting to think about affecting these changes. The last thing I'll probably just give you also is I've just anchored on this thing called seeing is believing, which is not really a new novel thing, but holy smokes, does it ever work in AI, right? We can talk all day, but until somebody actually sees that they could do that process without using Excel in like half the time, they'd be like, show me more. So that's what I would leave you with.
Hey, Chris. My name is Benjamin Kemp. I run a software company called Ambient, agentic AI for oil and gas. As you were presenting the materials, I really appreciated the change management component of what you're discussing. But there's one thing I want to kind of throw out there, especially for the folks trying to scale their company. So competitive advantage is really overlooked in Canada. So ROI is very inward looking. In the US, what we're finding, and the reason most of our revenue comes from the US, is they're outward looking. So they will be in a basin and say, who's the number one in that basin, and how do we become the number one in that basin? So as you're scaling your firms, one of the things I want people to think about, and this is where we're trying to be super deliberate, yes, you need revenue, yes, you need customers, but you are not equipped to service the whole sector. So if the whole sector said yes to you, you'd bankrupt your company. So you've got to be very deliberate on who you go out and find. And so in our readiness assessment, which is not exactly what you presented here today, it's slightly different, we don't spend a lot of time on ROI. It's a ticket to the game. And I got to be honest, I work for a producer in their Innovation Gateway team, and they never once went back and looked at the ROI of all the technologies they bought. So it was a way in through the door, but no one takes a rear view to say, did we actually be successful with that ROI or not? And so for us, what we're finding is competitive advantage and finding those customers that want to use tools to get more competitive. And that isn't necessarily always a C-suite conversation either. Because from my seat, if they want to be competitive, your speed of adoption and rate of adoption is way higher, which is why there's this whole powerful thought around, you know, you're hearing all these different types of AI. Now there's a new type, which is called magnetic AI, which is scaling in the enterprise. And the US firms are talking about it. No one in Canada is talking about magnetic AI. They're still looking for those individual niche use cases to justify why they should embrace AI. And we're catching a cold because of that. And so my thought or question to you is, when you're talking to Canadian customers as you do, how often does being competitive come up? Because I saw it as one of the elements under strategy. Because my fear is it's not coming up enough and it's not boiling up high enough as we think about our global competitiveness.
Yeah, I think what I would answer that with is they're definitely talking about being more competitive, but maybe it's not necessarily in those words. Everybody's looking to do more with less. It's just the realities of what we're having to work with. So it's still a lot of conversations in, right, being more productive, driving more tools, driving more technology, understanding how to like shift your mindset and shift your ways of working to no longer have to work with things like Excel and get things done in half the time, because the kinds of stuff that's coming is agentic AI. And in the future, what you're going to have to understand is how to coordinate and work with those kinds of tools, right? Which is going to require a mindset. So although there may not be, directly necessarily in every case talking about that, they absolutely are talking about how to, be more competitive, be more productive from that perspective, I would say.
Fantastic. Well, we're at time, so please show your appreciation for Chris and just a few solutions. Thank you.